and a very, very good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on which part of the world you're checking in from. I hope you're all having a fantastic day so far. Thank you so much for taking time to be part of today's Manage Engine webinar. I am Sharada Murthy. I'm a technical expert in Manage Engine AD Self-Service Plus. I work with the marketing team of Manage Engine, and I am your presenter for the day. Before I jump into today's session, I would like to do a very quick audio and video check. So if you can hear me loud and clear, and if you have no issues in viewing the screen, please drop in a yes message in the chat box provided. Thank you, Rakesh. I believe my voice is loud and clear. Perfect. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your confirmations. All right. So a very quick disclaimer before I jump into today's session. I'm working remotely. I'm working from home. And you know how the home network can be once in a while. So in case there are any technical glitches, any audio or video discrepancies, please keep me notified by dropping a message in the chat box provided. With Zoom, I unfortunately do not have an audience view as a presenter, so I wouldn't know if the broadcast is seamless unless you keep me notified. And yes, I also want to let you know that this session is being recorded and it's being recorded live. If you do have any questions, please keep them coming in the Q&A tab. I would love to take time to answer your questions during the session itself. And if not, the last 10-15 minutes can be a dedicated Q&A as well. So with no further delay, I'm going to jump into talking about a password security checklist that you need for remote working, especially for remote working. Since this webinar is a product webinar, we will be talking about AD Self-Service Plus and how to achieve the agenda put forth in front of us today here with AD Self-Service Plus. I would like to very quickly launch this poll that you see on the screen. Please take a couple of seconds to answer the poll question. This will help me understand what part of today's audience are existing customers of AD Self-Service Plus. If you're evaluating the solution, you can let me know by picking option 2. If it's neither, I would request you to skip the poll. Please do take a couple of seconds to answer the poll that you see on the screen. Right now, we're at a 50-50. All right. Perfect. All right. Thank you so much. What I'm also going to do is, since a few of you are either trying to familiarize yourself with AD Self-Service Plus, I am also going to pass on a demo link for you in the chat box provided. Thank you so much. All right, I believe my voice is still loud and clear. I just got a notification letting me know that the connection is unstable. So just a quick check. I hope I'm still audible. Please drop in your confirmations in the chat box provided if you can still hear me. Thank you. Thank you so much. Hello, hi, welcome. Hi. All right, perfect. So quickly jumping into the session plan for the day. The reason why this particular webinar is focused more towards remote working is also because a big part of us on a global level, a big part of organizations across the globe are going to continue to work remotely. I'm checking in from India today, and I have been working remotely for close to 13 months now, right? And it's important for us to be prepared, especially prepare the end users in our organization to be susceptible to be aware of their cybersecurity landscape, to be more aware of the attacks that they are susceptible to, and also have the right security practices in place. And simple things that are part of today's agenda will help you safeguard user identity, will help you defend the identities in your organization. And that is what today's session is going to be all about. All right, so I'm constantly getting prompts about my audio. At any point of time, if there are any glitches with my audio, if you cannot hear me loud and clear, please keep me notified by dropping a message in the chat box. I'm going to continue with the session in the hope that my voice is loud and clear and it's okay. Perfect. All right. So this is a very interesting report that I wanted to start today's session with. This is the remote desktop attack dynamics, the observation between 2019 to 2020. And when we speak about remote work, when we speak about working remotely on a global scale, I think 2020 was one of the greatest lessons for us on a global level, especially after February 2020. We saw, COVID spreading rapidly, and this particular virus also forced us, this pandemic forced us to continue to work remotely on a global level, on a mass level, right? But if you do notice, there's also a spike in cybersecurity attacks between February to April. And this was also the time when, organizations across the globe were forced to work remotely. But more importantly, this was also the period when attacks, remote desktop-based attacks, VPN vulnerabilities were exploited the most. If you go back and check the providers that you work with, if you do, you will notice that a lot of patching and vulnerability fixes were released between February to April, extending all the way till May. Especially with the VPN providers that you work with. And this is because this was also the time where we were not prepared for a mass remote working. Users were checking in remotely, connecting to the organization's network, connecting and accessing data and applications, critical applications, and their identity were susceptible to threat. If you do notice, there is a steep decrease between April to June, and yet you can see the spike continuing in a systematic manner. And trust me when I say this particular trend is continuing through 2021 as well. A large part of the world is continuing to work remotely even today. Do let me know what's the situation like in your organization. Have you resumed to go back to work? Are you still working remotely? Is it partial remote working or remote working on specific days? And this is more specifically addressing the end users in your organization, your employees in your organization. Do let me know, make use of the chat console to drop in your answers. But that said, this particular attack dynamics, this particular report or trend is continuing through 2021 as well. This is observed. I will be able to share more insights in the near future once we have data on the RDP attack dynamics for 2021. This is a very interesting report by Kaspersky. But what this also teaches us is that when we specifically talk about password security, when we specifically talk about password security in relation to remote working, the priority for us is to attend to end users. And this is simply because 95% of cybersecurity attacks or breaches that happen globally happen because, pardon me there, 95% of cybersecurity attacks or breaches that happen globally happen because of human error. And what we mean by human error is everything from user identities being misused, social engineering based attacks, clicking on malware links, phishing attacks. And I'm not sure if you've heard of the 80-20 rule, but the 80-20 rule basically talks about how 80% of cybersecurity attacks or attacks that we are more susceptible to, the more common cybersecurity attacks happen because of 20% of common reasons that we're well aware of. And one of the major contributors to cybersecurity attacks globally is user identity crisis, identity security, all right? And this is a spectrum that we definitely need to focus on, especially when we speak about remote working. So what I've planned today is I will be walking you through the little things that you can do on an organizational level to improve password security in your organization. I'm going to walk you through certain password best practices, very specifically password policy that you can customize for your hybrid environment. I am also going to talk about conditional access and being able to customize risk factors that will prevent malicious access, malicious attacks, or insider threat within your organization with or based on these conditions, based on these risk factors. and also talk about how you can enforce multi-factor authentication for all the VPNs in your organization and also for remote desktop access, your entire remote workforce. This is the agenda I put forth in front of me today. Before I walk you through how you can enable this with AD Self-Service Plus, I also have a question for all of you. I want to know what level of password security you have enabled in your organization, user identity security you have enabled in your organization. Do you have an advanced password policy? Do you work with a password policy that can be enforced in your hybrid environment? I would also like to know if you restrict access based on risk factors, if you have enabled multi-factor authentication for your remote users. Do let me know by dropping in your messages in the chat box provided. But what I'm going to do is also share the AD Self-Service Plus link, the demo link for all of you in the chat box. It's a live actionable demo. It does not require any credentials. You can click to log in as an administrator and explore the application along with me. What I've also done in the backend is I have pre-configured a setup, a live setup, where I will be able to walk you through password resets. I will be able to walk you through password policies that are enforced with this application that you see on the screen, all right? But even otherwise, even if you do not have AD Self-Service Plus installed in place, if you make use of other applications that your organization has deployed, it's important for you to put into effect all that we are discussing today to ensure that your users are multiple steps ahead of potential cybersecurity attacks, all right? This is just one way, one solution that allows or offers these. It's important for you to enable this, however, whatever works best for users in your organization. If you work with native tools, if you work with the native Microsoft tools, if you have other applications deployed for, multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication, it's good to get started right away and deploy multiple levels of authentication, and also ensure that you revisit your password policies, you revisit access control to ensure users on an organizational level, especially remote users, are secure, have secure access to their systems, to their application, to their data. And we are going to be seeing live examples today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get started with the custom granular password policy that I've enforced. All right. So I have enforced this policy right on the Gina CP console, which means when I, as an end user, try to reset my password or change my password from the Gina CP console, I have a custom granular password policy displayed. All right. The advantage of this particular password policy is that it takes into account password entry fee. So I have a check against multiple complexity rules that I've enabled, and I've done this deliberately because I want to show you what this password is. It's password at 123, one of the more common susceptible passwords, right? By default, if you do not have a granular password policy enforced, if you're working with the native Active Directory password policy, this particular password will be accepted, right? It is considered a good password. But in reality, we all know for a fact that it has a common word, it has a dictionary word. This particular password is susceptible to brute force attack, it is susceptible to pattern-based attack, dictionary-based attacks, all right? And this is exactly the kind of situation that we are trying to avoid. So even though this particular password satisfies multiple complexity rules that you see on the screen, it's important for you to work with better password policies by enforcing a password policy that takes into account more advanced password policy controls. So what do I mean by more advanced password policy controls? That is what I'm going to talk about next. Let me log into AD Self-Service Plus as an administrator. I'm going to jump to the configuration tab right here. All right, configuration tab. I'm going to jump to password policy enforcer. As you can see, I have enabled a custom granular password policy for administrative accounts. I have definitely increased complexity by working with rules like special characters, numerals, and uppercase right here. But I also want you to notice that I've disallowed dictionary words, I've disallowed patterns. And when I speak about patterns, I'm talking about any pattern that you can customize, days of a week, months of a calendar, qwerty, ASDF, you can import a custom pattern list as well. What I've also done is I've excluded characters from the username. I can choose to exclude characters from the old password and exclude the old password itself. With just these advanced complexity rules, I am ensuring that my users are not easily susceptible to brute force attack, pattern-based attack, incremental password-based attack, password history-based attack, and palindrome-based attacks, many other password-based attacks, like I named a few. What's also important, I can set restriction based on minimum password length. This could be 13, all right? You can also work with passphrases that allows passwords that are longer. And when the password is long enough, it does not have to meet the complexity requirements displayed or enforced right here. And when I say complexity requirements, I'm talking about including characters that you see on the screen right here, restricting passwords based on certain characters. Let me show you a simple example. Another tool that I'm really fond of is the Kaspersky password check tool. What this tool basically does is gives us a reality check on the passwords that we've been working with. It's a very simple, straightforward tool. Let me display the password I'm going to type in. We know for a fact that password at 123 is easily susceptible to attack. This particular password is clearly a bad password. It says it takes about 3 hours to brute force into. Even if I choose to increase complexity, it still is a bad password, right? But let's try a passphrase, for example. I'm giving in Sharadam Murthy is the presenter of the day. This is a simple, straightforward example of a passphrase, and it takes much longer to crack into. All right, it is a good password. This is a great example of why it's important to prioritize length over complexity. It is also a recommended NIST password guidelines. It is also a recommended NSC password guidelines, where it's important to prioritize password length over password complexity. So if you do not want to bombard users in your organization with a lot of complexity, like special characters and Unicode characters, you can choose to set a minimum password length of, let's say, 13 or more. You can also choose to enable the passphrase rule. But the added advantage of having a custom granular password policy, especially when you're working with native Active Directory, is also the fact that native Active Directory password policy that we work with even today, even in 2020, allows passwords that are weak, that are susceptible to cybersecurity attacks. And the problem, the bigger problem here is not that passwords are easily hackable. The bigger problem here is clearly the fact that password policy, the native Active Directory password policy, is not good enough. The advantage right here is that you will be able to enforce this across your GNR-CP console, your ADUC console as well. Let me show you an example real quick. And also enforce this custom granular password policy for your Office 365, G Suite, Salesforce, Zendesk, your databases, your Oracle setup across your forest level Active Directory as well. And this just makes things simple because users have to comply with better password practices, but more importantly, by displaying this across the reset password and change password pages, you're also ensuring that users are aware of the complexity root that comes, users are also aware of the complexity rules that they need to meet, making them aware of why they need better passwords in place. All right, I'm going to do a very quick reset in the ADUC console. I've logged in as an administrator, directly working on a DC level. I pretty much have at most privileges, and yet my password will be rejected while I try to reset password from the ADUC console because it does not meet the enforced custom granular password policy requirements. This is important. This is great. All right. Let me also very quickly walk you through a password reset for a hybrid environment. So I am going to access my GNR-CP, hit change a password, click reset password that is embedded right here. I have my AD self-service plus reset password link. I'm going to key in my username, key in the CAPTCHA, click on continue. I can choose to disable the CAPTCHA. I'm working with the default settings right now. I have a secure code sent to my mobile device. I've pre-configured Microsoft app-based authentication, set this particular method as mandatory. Looks like I've gone wrong with my text. I'm not sure if that's a B or a 6, but I'm going to go with B. Many a times I go wrong with my CAPTCHA. I'm going to wait for the previous code to expire. All right, I click on continue. Hard luck. Doing that again. All right, my verification has been successful. I can also work with another app-based authentication, but I'm going to stick to security question answers. I click on continue, answer my security questions. Choose to continue. And now I have the advantage as an end user to be able to reset password selectively for my Office 365 account, to choose to synchronize it with my AD. The added advantage here is obviously the fact that I will be able to set a password that complies with the custom granular password policy. Let me perform a password reset. Live, click on reset. I've also chosen to synchronize passwords between my AD and Cloud AD, Azure Active Directory. In the meantime, if you do have any questions, please keep them coming. If you want me to talk in detail about a particular module, I'd be happy to. If you have questions about best practices that I would recommend for your organization, a specific use case in your organization, please feel free to drop in your questions. I'd be happy to take them. If you also have tips, security tips, password security based tips, practices that you follow in your organization that has helped you, feel free to share it with the audience. I promise to read it out for our audience today. This is taking a bit of time. Yes, the password reset has been successful for both my on-prem and my cloud setup. Synchronized passwords, but at the same time, I've been able to do this successfully remotely while complying to an advanced password policy that is not easily susceptible to attacks, all right? So step one taken care of. I have enforced an advanced password policy for my hybrid environment. I've also enabled password self-service for users to be able to take care of their own password management chores. So administrators do not have to step in to help users reset passwords. That is critical, especially for remote users, because you need to ensure that these users have the privilege to reset passwords from anywhere at any time securely by verifying user identity, but more importantly, have the privilege of not having to, share their accounts access to any administrator, any technician, even if it's for a brief period of time, all right? That said, how do we implement conditional access? Right now, we all know for a fact that cybersecurity threats and cybersecurity attacks, the advancements when it comes to cybersecurity attacks are pretty high. And it's important for us to work with multiple levels of security to ensure users in the organization go through a secure, seamless password reset, have secure access to applications, and this can be achieved with conditional access, all right? And this is where the machine, this is where the application, this is where AD Self-Service Plus thinks for itself to decide whether a particular user requires access to a particular process, a self-service process, access to applications, access to endpoints. All right, so I'm going to hit conditional access. I've surpassed my idle time, so logging in again, jumping to conditional access under configuration. I have a conditional access set up and running, right? So let me show you how this basically works. What happens is you set the conditions, and these conditions are usually the device that they can log in from, the location, the geolocation they can log in from, set your business hours, set the safe network configuration, your IP addresses, and this is good enough for the application to decide if a user logging in at any point of time requires complete access to all the self-service features, needs to verify their identity multiple times, or work with limited access or increased, or block access because the risk factors are high. All right, this is a very simple pictorial representation of how conditional access works, but this is not manual. The application decides for itself whether a particular user logging in from a particular device through a particular platform or a particular computer itself that you have configured, that you have enabled, a user logging in at a particular time, a user logging in from a particular location as well. More importantly, also logging in through specific IP addresses, VPN and otherwise, requires complete access, full access to self-service features, or needs to be working with increased MFA, needs to be working with restricted access, or must be disallowed access because the risk factors are high. So it's a simple criteria, it's a simple and or a not condition that you can customize right here. I have set up conditional access for the marketing and finance policies right here. I can choose to enable them, which means users logging in only from these devices at this particular time will be allowed access. And if the risk factor is high, will automatically be denied access. This is extremely critical, especially when you're working with remote users, right? You do not want somebody checking in to try to perform a password self-service for a user sitting in Europe at non-business hours from India or even Mexico at, let's say, 1 a.m. in the morning. It's happened to me. I'm being honest right here. I have had password reset requests trigger. This was last year, and I remember this very vividly because I had 13 emails that I woke up to, and this IP address was, this IP or this particular cyber intrusion was attempted at 1 a.m. for my social media account from an IP map to Mexico. All right, so it's very important for you to, especially when you're working with a huge number of users, especially when you're working with critical business resources, it's important to set or define your conditions and also ensure that the right person has right access. So speaking about access, what I've also done is I've enabled multi-factor authentication. Before I show you this in action, let me show you how simple and straightforward it is to enable MFA. So I'm going to click on MFA right here. I have pre-configured a couple of authenticators. I have enabled different levels of authentication for different users. I've also enabled MFA for my endpoints. I can also choose to set a particular authenticator as mandatory. All right. This works for my single sign-on applications, for my AD Self-Service Plus logon, for my self-service process, my VPN access from, and also for my endpoints, my Windows Mac Linux system. So let's see this in action. Let me take a remote desktop connection right now. Try to log in as Sharada with the password that we just reset. Keying in the password. I click on OK. I'm going to wait for this to go through. My first factor of authentication here is my native Active Directory password. All right. Traditionally, I would have access to my remote desktop. What's going to happen here is I've been redirected to the AD Self-Service Plus console. I need to enter the answer to my security questions. I can also choose to work with different authenticators, biometrics, hardware token-based authentication. I can work with SAML authentication. Pretty much any authenticator that works best for users in your organization can be configured. And once I have successfully verified my identity with the secondary factor of authentication in this particular case, I then have access to my Windows machine. Sorry about the lag. It's 2021 and I'm still complaining about slow machines. But yes, I do have access to my Windows logon, secure access to my Windows logon while accessing my machine remotely, also while accessing my also while accessing my machine remotely, but more importantly, only after I verify my identity with not one, but two factors of authentication. Let's see how this works for VPN as well. I have pre-configured this for an AWS setup. Because of the firewall restrictions in my organization, I have a dummy setup that I'm working with. So keying in the first factor of authentication right here, which is my password. Let me try to establish a secure connection to my cloud setup. In the meantime, I'm going to check if we do have any questions. Yes. I need to verify my identity with Google Authenticator. That's the authentication mode that I've enabled for this particular user, Adam, for VPN logon. I'm waiting for the verification to go through. I hope the password, the time-based passcode, did not expire. Yes, perfect. The verification is through and I do have a successful secure connection to my VPN right here. Once again, this is important simply because you need to ensure that the right person has right access to the right machine. And this is great because when we speak about identity security, when we speak about having better password security measures in your organization, the first, foremost, most critical, and the best thing that you can do for every single user in your organization is to enable multi-factor authentication. And when I say multi-factor authentication, I am definitely talking about three different levels of authentication. Number one would be your password, something the user knows. Number two would definitely be something that belongs to the user. This could be an email account, a mobile device, mobile app, hardware token, all right? This could be any account that can verify the user's identity that belongs to the user. And the third and final level would be biometrics. A face ID scan, a fingerprint scan is good enough. And this is important because this will prevent close to 99% of attacks in your organization, especially when you're working with a completely cloud-based infrastructure. So coming back to the session agenda, with that, I've almost covered all the exercises in today's agenda. I'm open for questions. I'm open for any particular module that you would like me to talk about, especially speaking about password security and identity security. A very quick, very quick run through of all that we saw in today's session. Work with an enhanced password policy, especially for your hybrid environment. When I say hybrid environment, it's important for you to address the shortcomings of your native on-premises infrastructure while also not compromising the security posture of your cloud applications, especially with the cybersecurity scenario in 2020. Cloud-based cybersecurity attacks are going to see a rapid increase. Small and medium businesses are going to see an increase in cybersecurity threats. This is the situation that we are pushed to, and this is primarily caused because of mass remote working, not having the right security practices in place, having or working with open access or one level of access for all users. And it's important to educate users, end users, especially in your organization, because nearly 80% of cyber attacks target end users in your organization. They do not target privileged accounts. They do not target administrative accounts. They do not target temporary user accounts or contract employees. 80% of attacks that happen globally always target end users. They are easily susceptible to cybersecurity attacks, and nearly 95% cybersecurity attacks that happen globally, I'm talking about a vast majority, happens because of human error. So it's important for you to work with better password policies, enforce this on an organizational level, implement conditional access, ensure only the right people have right access to the right machine at the right time, and allow the application to use its intelligence to decide what is right at a particular condition, all right? And also enforce multi-factor authentication for your entire remote workforce, for your VPN logons, for your remote desktops, for your endpoints, if possible, also for your mobile devices as well. Ensure that the right person has the right access to the right machine at the right time, but more importantly, secure access no matter where they connect from, no matter how, why, and when they connect from. And also keep a constant tab on user activity in your organization. With AD Self-Service Plus, we definitely have audit reports that can help you do that. Keep a tab on user attempt audit report, especially in the self-service scenario. You will know what's happening in your environment, right from manual logons, password resets, machine logons, MFA-enabled failures as well. And this will keep you multiple steps ahead of potential cybersecurity attack. This is a great basic password checklist that you need to ensure users in your organization are well protected. All right. If you do have any more questions, please keep them coming. This session is particularly focused on securing user identities. I have two questions from, one is from Xavier. Please pardon me if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Xavier, yes, this presentation is available for playback. I will ensure that a copy of today's presentation as well as the recording reaches your inbox. Hi, Biju. AD Self-Service Plus is available for trial. A fully functional trial for up to 30 days is available. You can download the application right from adselfserviceplus.com. Thank you so much. If you do have any technical questions for me, please keep them coming. I'm going to take time to answer your questions offline. You can also write to me at shard@manageengine.com. At any point of time, if you have trouble with the application, if you would like to explore the application along with me, set up a personalized demonstration, or simply have a quick chat about password best practices, how to secure your hybrid identity environment, please feel free to drop an email to me. I'd be happy to assist you. And with that, I'm going to quickly wrap up the session for the day. Before you check out of today's session, please take a couple of seconds to answer the poll that you see on the screen. You can also pass on your feedback, your criticisms, your comments, ideas, and suggestions to improve this experience for the upcoming audience as well. I really appreciate it, and that is what will help me build myself and be better for the upcoming audience. So thank you so much for that. Before I check out of today's session, I would like to quickly put this thought across. I wish, hope, and pray you, your friends, your family, your near and dear are blessed with great health and happiness. Please take great care of yourself, and let's fight this pandemic and come out as better, happier, stronger, healthier individuals. And that's my wish for every single one of you here today. Thank you so much for taking time off your busy schedule. Thank you so much for being part of today's session. I really hope it was informative. I'm going to take time to answer questions offline. So if you do have any, please keep them coming. On that note, this is Sharada Murthy from the marketing team of Manage Engine signing off for the day. Thank you and namaste.